Welcome to Postcards to the Universe with Melissa Caprio. Do you believe in magic? What if you were told that all you had to do was get a little creative and work a magic spell to bring anything you can imagine into your life? Here on Postcards to the Universe, we will share manifesting, tips, postcards, creativity, abundance, and prosperity. Here is your host, Melissa Caprio.
Hello and welcome to Postcards to the Universe with Melissa, creating the life you crave. How's everybody doing? I hope that you guys are doing well this Wednesday. It's my favorite day of the week. I love having this show and I love talking to you guys. And I'm excited about today's show. I have a very interesting guest. Her name is Jenn Wodtke, and she is a pleasure and orgasm coach. And she's going to join me in just a few minutes. We've been having a little bit of connection problems. Jenn, are you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Am I okay? Do I sound okay, or do you need to call back? Because I do a little in the beginning talking about some things I'm doing before we have our wonderful conversation. But you can hear me good? I just want to make sure.
You're super fuzzy. I can only make out like every third word.
Okay, why don't you hang up and call back in?
Okay.
Try to call back. Oh, it's me. Okie dokie. Maybe I need to hang up and call back in. Okay. I don't know, because if it's me, I don't know. I've tried to connect 3 different ways. So I hope people can hear me. If anybody who listens to me on a regular basis, let me know if I sound fuzzy to you, because then I can call back in. I am excited, like I said, to have this show. A little bit about me. I'm an author. I have a book. It's titled Postcards to the Universe, Harness the Universe's Power and Manifest Your Dreams. Maybe that's a little bit better. How's that sound? Do I sound a little bit better at all? Hello?
Tiny bit better.
Yeah, a little bit better. I don't know. I'm trying like every single way that I can connect. All right, we're just going to go right to it, Jen, because this is like so twisted today. I don't know. This is the problem when we do live. Like I was originally connected good, and then something happened. So let me share a little bit about Jenn for those who are listening. Jenn Wodtke helps women find deep fulfillment and self-worth through connection with their desires, sexuality, and pleasure. As a pleasure and orgasm coach, her clients learn how to quiet their inner critic, get out of their mind and into their body so they can expand their pleasure and orgasmic capacity, leading to the greater personal power and satisfaction. Jenn is passionate about supporting women as they reclaim power that has historically been denied them for millennia, on the global stage, in the church, in their sexuality, in their communities, and in the workforce. Jenn is the founder of the Touchless Orgasm Method, a revolutionary approach that focuses on how to connect with the pleasure that is already inside us. Jenn says, growing up in a conservative Canada, I had unconsciously numbed my sexuality. The process of waking up began in my early 20s with my first touchless orgasm in my sleep. It culminated in a full awakening at a women's retreat. I now teach women how to experience expansive pleasure building all the way to touchless orgasm. Hi, Jenn. Welcome so much. I hope that you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I caught most of that, so I hope we're good.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I want you to talk and tell everybody a little bit about you, and I'm going to try to reconnect in another way, because you got to hear me. So just share yourself with everybody. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay.
Sounds good. As was mentioned by Melissa as she was introducing me, I first sort of stumbled into or found myself having my very first touchless orgasm in my sleep, which I didn't realize at the time was so life-changing. At the time, I had nowhere to put that experience because I had only ever really learned in my public school sexual education, that men had those types of experiences. So I had no concept that this was something that women could do as well. So I kind of just left it there. I didn't really do anything with it. And every now and then it popped back into my mind. It's like, wow, my brain and my body did this while I was completely unconscious. And as I got further into my formal sexuality studies, I just became convinced that if I could do this during my sleep, I could learn to do it awake. And that has sort of kind of been a large part of my journey into becoming a pleasure and sexuality coach. It was like figuring out how to take that unconscious experience that was amazing, like having an orgasm in my sleep, like that was super fun. But I wanted to be able to do it waking.
That sounds super fun. You should be able to hear me better now. I think we finally got it figured out. Yeah,
you're better.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I don't know what. There's a glitch. That's the one thing I hate about doing a live show. There's nothing we can do about it, but we're all good now. I don't even know. Are you calling in from Japan?
I am in Japan right now, yes.
Yeah, yeah. That's the one good thing about the internet, right? We can connect all around the world. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I've had dreams where I've actually had, I never thought about it as a touchless orgasm, truthfully, because in the dream I was having a sexual experience, but I guess my physical body wasn't being touched, right? So it's all in your brain. Like I never even thought about it until I was reading about you, and then how you had your first experience. So are you saying like we can like do that without dreaming? Like we can.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. That's what I want to find out. I'm sure a lot of women who are listening are probably like, that's pretty interesting. So you've learned how to have an orgasm kind of, is it at will? Like, I don't even know how to even say it.
I wouldn't call it at will.
Okay.
I mean, here's what I think are the bones of it. In concept, it's a fairly simple process in the sense that you use what I think of as your activated mind, right? So you're consciously and deliberately focusing on your pleasure. So once you kind of, set your intention to do that, then you put that attention, that awareness onto your body, right? And focus in on what pleasure sensations are already alive, what you can feel. And that varies from person to person, sort of that, I wouldn't say the innate ability, but what we're able to access. And then we just work on expanding and building that pleasure. So the concept is super, super simple, right? Anybody can learn to do this. Where it does get complicated, and I'm sure a lot of your audience is going, this sounds kind of like nonsense, like I don't really believe this. Yeah. What can be really difficult for a lot of people is that almost all of us have all sorts of like conditioning and messaging from, our society, our families, church, school, media, all of that, about what is acceptable in our sexuality, what is acceptable for pleasure, what is acceptable for orgasm, right? So we have a lot of basically kind of like gunk in the way. So that's where a lot of people might find it not a simple process. It's like, how do you dig out that gunk to get to the place where you can experience this touchless pleasure and orgasm? But what I would say, even if people might not experience the full touchless orgasm, you can still make huge, huge gains in your touchless pleasure, right? Like, once you start getting into the practice of doing this, it becomes a skill. Our pleasure really responds to practice, and it is a skill that we can grow. So if you start your own touchless orgasm practice, even if you don't get to orgasm, maybe that's not even your goal, but you have this amazing ability that you can, I would say that's the at will part. So I'm sitting here in front of my computer, like I can just focus, right? And be like, ooh, okay, like that's alive inside of my pussy today. Like, what is she feeling? What is she wanting? Like, so that I think is the beauty of it, to become more sort of in touch with your pleasure on a minute by minute daily basis if you desire.
Well, it's really interesting because I imagine that what you're doing and what you're helping women do is very empowering, right? Because there's still such a stigma around women's sexuality, right? like, women having any power in their own sexuality. I mean, there's still comments being made about powerful women about how they slept their way to the top, right? Nobody says that about men. And it's still very misogynistic and double standard and all that stuff. And then I also, a second part of that is I imagine that this is very helpful for people who have sexual trauma. Because they can go through a process without actually being touched.
I wanted to, there's sort of two things in there. The first thing I wanted to just sort of recognize, women who slip their way to the top. What we never talk about is men who force women to play those power games. So that's where I think, that's why I talk a lot about power and pleasure. I think they are so inextricably linked, especially for women, that we have been systemically, disempowered from all arenas for millennia through our sexuality, right? Like, it wasn't that long ago, a woman who might have had a child out of wedlock, was shunned, doomed to a life of poverty because she couldn't, get a job and all of those kinds of things. So that's where I think the power piece comes in.
Right.
And the second part of that is there is a trauma, like you mentioned. I think there's I think there's a generational trauma. I think there's millennia of women, of wounding that women carry through this, disempowerment, through this lack of ability to live their sexual lives as they desire. And then individually, whatever any woman may have faced throughout her life, some sort of assault or having a partner who didn't honor her boundaries or whatever, I think it's all linked. And I absolutely find this such an empowering practice that any woman, if she learns the method, can sort of just go, okay, I'm just going to experience pleasure by myself, for myself.
Right.
This isn't visible to anybody. I can just sit and be with my body and be with my pleasure and just enjoy that without any of the outside sort of, gunk, right? And so I also consider it a major paradigm shift that instead of getting our pleasure from the outside in, which is great and wonderful, like partners, toys, and hands, amazing. I will never give those up. But when we make that shift and we decide to experience pleasure from the inside out first, it's just such a vastly, vastly different pleasure experience. And I find it so nourishing, so healing, and just so amazing for our growth.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was thinking as you were talking that it's so important because I think everybody does this. Women, I believe women especially does. We disconnect from our bodies, right? Yeah. So, I mean, we try to disconnect when we're in pain. We don't ask the pain why it's here, what it's showing us. We take stuff to make it, disappear, medicines or drugs or whatever. And it's probably on the flip side of that, the same with our pleasure. We disconnect from our bodies, maybe we're somewhere else and our to-do list is so long, you can't even think about being with your own body and experiencing pleasure. Do you find that a lot with your clients?
Yeah, I think what happens, a lot of us, like you said, don't want to feel pain, obviously, like humans will avoid pain. So there is that disconnect that can also come hand in hand with a numbing of, not wanting to feel in the body. But what happens, we can't selectively numb, right? If we're numbing our pain, we are absolutely numbing our pleasure. If we disconnect from our body because we don't want to feel the pain, we've also disconnected from our pleasure. So that's the other thing that is really difficult about this work. I don't want to be clickbait, touchless orgasm. This is hard work.
Yeah.
This is hard work because you have to be able to look at your pain. Your shame is a big one too. And all of that stuff that we take on. If you want to achieve, the endless, infinite pleasure that is available to you, you have to look at your pain and you have to feel it. And feeling it is a way to releasing it, right? Yeah. So that's where people often go, oh, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get into it. It feels too much. And that is where coaching comes in. I'm a one-on-one coach as well as I teach touchless orgasm in a book and inside of a program. But the one-on-one coaching program is there for someone to really help you work through whatever your own individual blocks and pain and numbing is, so that you can come out of it and start moving into that pleasure and living in that pleasure day to day.
Yeah. So it's even deeper than just sexual healing, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel like just hearing you talking about what you do, like there's a real, you're really connecting with your physical body and your emotional body while you're processing that. I mean, think about how many women, just women, and I know men do this too, but every time, you look in the mirror, you do nothing but criticize yourself. You criticize and shame your body, right? So it's like you're training yourself to do something different. This is loving your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that shift into loving, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I think loving our body is huge. So many women who come to me have absolutely issues with body image, for sure. But it's also bigger than that, right? Like it is learning how to love every part of you. I mean, for me, one of the I never experienced a lot of shame and anxiety until the pandemic. Then I was like, oh my God, is this what people have been talking about? Like, this is terrible. And I've
What do
used
you
my
mean
practice-
though? Like what happened during the pandemic? Like you were like,
Nothing specific. I used to work in film, so my job unfortunately became untenable. Somebody made my life living hell at work. So I had to quit my job in the pandemic, which was terrifying. I called to my parents and I was like, oh my God, I gotta quit this job. Like, because my brain's like, if you'll never make money again. So basically I called my parents. I was like, if I never get another job, will you help me? And they're like, yes, we'll help you. Yes. So it was just that like uncontrollable shame that like is not logical.
So you were experiencing it for yourself for the first time. Okay, got it.
I mean, I've experienced shame before, obviously, but not to that like. It was like a monster got its like fangs in me and like wouldn't let go, right?
Sure.
And so that was when I first really understood that you have to find a way to love all these parts of yourselves. Like I've done shamegasms, right, which is amazing. But part of that is like looking at the shame and being like, okay, this is a part of me from somewhere inside of me. What is it? Where does it come from? Like I have to accept my shame, my rage, my jealousy, all of those things on the way to loving not only my body, but all parts of myself. That I think is one of the foundational steps to any type of massive epic pleasure.
That is a new one, shamegasm. I like.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's actually up on my YouTube, so anybody can go and find it. It's up there right now. And you can use it for any really strong, challenging emotion, but it really starts the process of using pleasure as a portal to transformation. So we basically flip from shame to pleasure, back and forth, so that it sort of becomes intermingled, and it really creates this experience in your body that like, I am still worthy of pleasure. I can still experience pleasure and orgasm, even with this shame piece that is inside me. So that's really healing.
Yeah, because you talk about what role shame plays in sexuality. So why do you think there is so much shame around our sexuality, what we like, what we don't like, even pleasuring ourselves, other partners? I mean, I imagine, when people saw today's show and they saw Touchless Orgasm, of course, they're like, anytime anything sexual, because people's interest gets piqued, but it's much deeper work, This isn't this isn't Pornhub, people, like we're talking deeper, right? This is much deeper than that. So, but it does pique our interest, but then everybody's always ashamed of their sexual wants and desires. So why do you think that is? You think it's just generational, it's just passed down?
Yeah, I think it's so multifaceted. I think, here in the West, we fundamentally come from a puritanical society. Like our roots are puritanical.
Yes.
And we really, really value sacrifice in our culture. Like, even if you think about going out and eating, whatever your most delicious thing is, for me, it's like, give me like the best piece of cheesecake. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to go for a 45-minute run after that and go lift some extra weights, right? Like, there's always this, if I'm going to do this, like,
that's true.
That's true. Pleasurable, I need to work it off somehow. Yeah. And we really value, it's so deep in our system as a society, in our psyche as a society, valuing this sacrifice. We don't have an intrinsic belief in the value of pleasure for pleasure. And that has been for generations, for millennia in our society, right? So I think that plays into it. I think we still live in a fairly misogynist, patriarchal society that really doesn't like women. You could broadly say that. And it really, and it really doesn't like sexual women.
Yeah. Well, we're not gonna get into politics, but you could see it if you watched the debate last night.
Yeah.
So we'll just leave it there. Yeah.
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 But yeah, and I think, and then you add in the church, a lot of people that might still be religious or have grown up in the church, like there's very much these very narrow parameters under which you are able to be sexual, and it really just excludes whole swaths of people from sexuality that they don't consider sinful or shameful or whatever. So it's just, it's this multifaceted, it comes at us from all sides, and I think it's almost impossible to grow up in our society and not take some of that on in some way. And I think what's so insidious is that it's so unconscious for a lot of us. Like, we're not thinking about this, right? Like, nobody's pointing at a finger at us and directly saying to our faces, but we're just getting bombarded with all these like micro shameful messaging that it's really hard to escape. And once you become aware of it, that's, I think, where you can start to have massive transformations in your, not only your sexual life, but in your life in general, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, that's true, because America especially is very puritanical. Now, how is the culture in Japan? Since you're there now, you're living there now. How is that? How do you find it? Is it different about the way that they? No, it's similar. Okay.
It's they're one of the craziest stories I've read about sexism in Japan. It's not, again, overtly sexual, but in recent years, apparently, so many more women were getting accepted to medical schools. And I think, I can't remember the name of the university here in Tokyo, so don't quote me on that, but a fairly prestigious university. And the powers that be were like horrified by this. So what did they do? God. They just altered test scores based on gender, and basically women that might have scored, I think for a woman to be accepted, they would have had to have scored something like 20 points over the male standard. They adjusted the scores that much. So that's the kind of sexism that goes on in Japan.
That's interesting. It's really interesting how afraid men are of women. It's and you would think that it would be to their benefit to not be that way. It really would. That's the thing that cracks me up, because their lives would be so much better if they weren't so afraid of us.
That's the thing. That's something that haunts me. It sounds so silly, but it haunts me. And not just for women. When you think about any, disempowered or suppressed group of people across history, like how much more beautiful would our society be? How many more inventions, how many more advancements would we have if we had let everybody have access
at the table
to right? It's just
I know. I know. So do you only see women, or do you see, is this specifically for women, since we're talking about men and women, or do you see men too? Or do men show up to your
anybody can
courses? Okay.
I would say anybody is capable of touchless orgasm and touchless orgasm, regardless of gender. Coming, my experience as a cis het woman, that's been my experience in this body. So I primarily do work with women just because I don't feel confident talking to men about their experiences, because I haven't experienced pleasure in that body. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Because I want to get into a little bit about your process, what you share with your clients and in your classes, your courses, workshops, all that kind of stuff. But I just looked, and we're going to be coming up. We take a break. I didn't get a chance to tell you this because we were scrambling to get on the show, but we take a commercial break for a couple of minutes at mid-time mark. So let's take it here. We'll come back, and then I want to talk more about the process of what you teach us with the touchless orgasm. All right, everybody, stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Conscious media for conscious minds. Om Times. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Everyone has a story. I have a story. You have a story. We all have a story. As I see it, you have 3 choices. Allow your story to define you, use it to excuse you, or utilize it as a method to empower you. It's your life. You have the power. You choose. Rewrite your story on finduniquelyu.com.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Hi, I'm Melissa Caprio from Postcards to the Universe, creating the life you crave. Do you believe in magic? What if I told you all you had to do was get a little creative and work a dream spell to bring anything you can imagine into your life? Well, guess what? I've got the spell for you. Postcards to the Universe, a global movement for manifestation, is a casting magical tool for you to use whenever you want. How does living in passion sound to you? Join me in my movement where you get to create in the magical playground. Let's think outside the box and do some playful conjuring. By casting out our desires with a manifesting postcard, we explore our hearts and allow the alchemy of our dreams to appear. And don't forget to tune in each week here on Om Times Radio with my show, Postcards to the Universe, creating the life you crave at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I share tips on creativity, abundance, and prosperity, and you will be introduced to the coolest guests, trailblazers, mystics, and creatives who enrich our lives. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. If you're just joining me, I have Jenn Wodtke, and she is a pleasure and orgasm coach, and she helps all of us, whoever is interested, learn the Touchless Orgasm Method. It's a revolutionary approach that she has been focusing on how to connect with our pleasure, which I think is really fascinating. So, Jenn, can you share a little bit about what is the process like somebody who's listening and is like, I kind of want to explore that, but what is it going to look like? What are we going to do? Kind of thing. What homework do I have to do? That kind of stuff.
I think it's some of the best homework you'll ever have, personally. But
that's what I was thinking too. Right?
Yeah. So there's kind of 3 main elements that we work on in touchless orgasm. So it's body, mind, and pleasure building. So starting with the body, there's 2 main elements here. So we want to reconnect and get us out of any numbness that is there so that we can really feel into the sensations of pleasure that is inside of our body. And we also want to use our body as a tool to sort of liberate some of that, gunk I was talking about earlier that is stuck inside of us. We want it to liberate. So we use things like breath work, sounding, movement, to sort of just release anything that's inside of the body that is not in service to pleasure and is keeping us from accessing our pleasure. And then, like I said, we work on the sensitization of our bodies, which is super fun. And then, of course, the mind piece, the mind and the body have to work together, right? We can't get to pleasure building unless they're working together. So the mind, we have a lot of tools that sort of help us, like when we start releasing some of that stuff in the body, our mind can kind of be like, oh my God, like I shoved all of this down the well for a reason. Because like I was talking earlier, like if we're going to feel pleasure, sometimes we have to feel all of that pain. So we have tools to allow the mind to sort of like deal with, I kind of think of them as mind freaks. When our mind freaks out because we've started looking at some of the stuff. So there's tools to help us calm and self-soothe and to deal with some of that stuff that gets released as we start to sort of release the pleasure. And then we really use the mind. Our mind is so incredibly powerful. Like I said, we can have this touchless orgasm in sleep and we can have it awake. So it's so crazy, so powerful. So we harness that power of the mind so that we can start sort of creating these new pathways to pleasure, neural pathways, so that we can have the pleasure that we want. We can have the orgasms that we want. And then the last piece is putting it all together, right, into pleasure building. So to give an example of sort of putting that all together so people can sort of conceptualize what it actually is like in practice. One of the most, one of the beginner practices, and I call it just beginner just because anybody listening can do this on their own, like you don't need a whole bunch of tools or guidance, is simply a pleasure meditation. So I recommend doing it either right before you get out of bed or right before you fall to sleep, and you just kind of do all the traditional meditation things to calm the mind, right? Like breathing, visualizing, putting any intrusive thoughts in a container, that kind of thing to get started. And then we just turn our attention inward to the body, and you just breathe, and you do a scan, like head to toe, like what am I feeling? What's alive in my body? Like, is there any tingling anywhere? Is anything hot, cold, any sensations? So we just do that little scan, like what's alive in my body right now. And then we end at our genitals. So we really focus and just spend, like people can even do this listening as I'm talking. Just putting the focus on genitals, like what do I feel? What's alive right now? And then just breathing and just staying with the sensations in the genitals for as long as possible. Just letting that sort of whatever is there and
allowing whatever comes.
Allowing it. And it might, the first time people do this, they might not be able to identify or feel a sensation in the genitals.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that you were, because like I said earlier, so we're so disconnected sometimes with our bodies that you might be like, I don't feel anything. Right?
Yeah, and numbness, and in the context of touchless orgasm, numbness is a sensation. Numbness is a feeling. Numbness is something that is alive, right? It's just the absence, right? Yeah. So if that is the case, somebody's like, oh my God, what is she talking about? I can't feel anything. That's okay. Totally normal.
Yeah.
You just continue to keep your awareness there. You keep breathing. And if it feels safe to do so, sometimes numbness can come with a feeling of, I don't feel safe to experience pleasure. Yeah. But if it feels safe, you can let your mind sort of imagine what pleasure would feel like if it was there. Right? And sort of just, and that's a super simple beginner exercise, and just feel into that and see what's there. And the other thing too is this is not going to be the same every time.
Of course.
Right? So some days you might have that numbness. Some days you might feel a little bit more, whatever it is for you. Maybe it's tingling or pulsing or champagne bubbles, whatever. Yeah. And the next day it could be much more alive and sort of in your face. So it can really, really vary. But the key is that you're carving out time to focus on your body, on your pleasure, and you're not judging it. You're not like trying to do something with it. You're simply going to experience whatever is there in that moment for, it can be as little as 5 minutes at the start.
Yeah, that's very simple. I mean, it's not really a very difficult exercise. It's good to scan your body anyway as part of a meditation, just to see, because we ignore our bodies a lot. And it's giving us clues about things that are going on, right? Like, why do I have this ache here? What is this pain here? What is this, what is this sensation here? So since we do that a lot anyway, why not add some pleasure to our experience?
Yeah,
I think it just sounds...
totally.
So let me ask you, well, first I wanted just to say this before I ask you this question. I thought this was... one of the things that I have done in my workshops because talking about self-love is I have a photography background, so I'm a visual artist. So I have people do self-portraits as part of self-love, but not selfies. Very different from selfies, and it makes people very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable exercise because you have to really look at yourself and it's learning to visually look at yourself and love yourself in a different way, right? Because a self-portrait doesn't necessarily have to be what people would traditionally think. So people get really creative when they start doing that. So I just thought, like, when we were talking about, I was thinking that when you were talking about how it's such a practice of love, this self-pleasure that you're teaching women especially how to do, right? Because that's really what it is. Because people who don't love themselves or don't even want to try to love themselves are not going to be your clients. They're not going to come to you. They're energetically, they're in a whole different space. We come to people like you when we are rediscovering ourselves, when we're learning how to love ourselves, and we need help. We need assistance. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. Totally. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how many couple things in what you said. I get a lot of women who are like, I just know there's more. They can't articulate it. Yeah. So there's this like desire to grow into something that brings people to me, which is amazing. And, going back to what you were talking about with the self-portrait, it reminded me of one of my most powerful pleasure practices that I have done for myself. This was inside of my coach training, was to pleasure yourself while watching yourself in the mirror. And I was like, what are you talking about? Oh my God, I can't do that. That's,
I know.
But I was like, I'm gonna do it, right? I'm gonna do the uncomfortable things. I'm gonna look at the things. I'm not gonna. It was very much like, I'm not gonna look away from myself in this moment, right? Like when you start to look away from yourself, and I know that can feel so scary to do the self-portrait that you've talked about, or watch yourself in pleasure. But I was like, I've paid so much money to be in this course. I'm not gonna look away. I'm not gonna look away, right? And so I did it. And at the start, I was like, oh, this is so awkward. But then, like, a few minutes into it, I was like, hot damn, mama. Like,
I love that.
Like, my body's far from perfect. But I was like, there was something about watching myself in pleasure. I was like, that's beautiful and hot for any human being. Like, to watch another person in pleasure. Like, it was really, really an amazing experience that, I would never have done had I not been in this course and again, forced myself to not look away from myself. So that was, it was good.
No, that makes sense. And I guarantee you, anybody listening to what you just said right now, just check in with how you felt when she said that, imagining yourself. If you went like this, like you cringed, or you're like, oh, I could never, or, you felt like yourself tense up, then you probably need to do it.
Yes, exactly. Right? It's those moments of like, that often tells us where we need to go. Everybody listening, please go watch yourself self-pleasure tonight.
Yeah, let us know how it went. No, I think it's good because I mean, we're here having this human experience, right? Like, well, whatever your belief is, wherever you came from, you know, I mean, to me, we come from a universal energy, God, you know, and we're having this human experience. And so we're supposed to have pleasure.
Yes.
We're supposed to love ourselves. This is why we're here. We're here to love ourselves and others, or we wouldn't be here. So it's just another, to me, layer of self-love, but through sexuality, through your own sexuality in your own body of what the work that you're doing. Yeah.
And I think I agree exactly what you said. Like, we are here for no other reason than to experience pleasure.
Yep.
And to connect with other humans. Like, that's, I don't know, that's all there is, really. Like, everything else is just noise in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So now, what do you recommend for somebody listening? Because I personally know a lot of women who have sexual trauma. And, you know, this, I imagine, for someone who has this kind of work is very, you know, I don't know the word I'm looking for. Like, I just imagine it's more intense. Maybe if there's like a sexual trauma component when you're coming to this kind of work, how would you, what would you say to somebody who has had some sexual trauma and how this can be healing for them?
Yeah, I think anybody that has had sexual trauma, first and foremost, if they can see, if they have not, if they are able to see a professional, that's the first thing I recommend. Like, you need somebody, and somebody to be able to guide you through that and to hold space. And sometimes that is a therapist. You need a therapist. I want to be very clear. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I am a coach. It's a very different modality. Yeah. So somebody that has really like deep trauma and like that is having like PTSD reactions sometimes, they need to, that's a therapy situation. But if it's trauma in the sense that you have wounding, but you're not going into terror, you're not going into PTSD, then you might not need a therapist. You might have more options in terms of who you can find to hold space for you. But you can also self-heal, right? Like, there's the first thing I would say is get on the internet, go do some research, because there are a lot of coaches like myself who have a lot of great free resources out there. So there are a lot of practices and tools that you can learn to start the process on your own if you don't have the ability to go and see a professional. And just be kind to yourself, right? Like, it's not an overnight thing to heal from wounding, to heal from trauma, but I truly believe that we all have the capacity to do that healing work. And I think when we come out on the other side, like, you know, it's there's this phrase I can't remember the actual phrase, but there's this concept in Japanese of like pottery that's been broken.
Yes, I know.
And they put it back.
Put the gold.
I can't think of the word. Yeah.
Yes,
and I think it's such a beautiful,
I know.
Can't think of the word. Symbol of humans as well, right? So if you can heal from that trauma, you're going to be more beautiful and more powerful for it. And I think for any trauma, sexual or otherwise, I think the first key is to always just connect with the body. Like, do a version of the meditation that I mentioned earlier, like connect with your body and connect with whatever pleasure is there. I think that's a good first step that somebody can do that's really gentle and really kind to yourself and doesn't take you too far. It doesn't like push you back into that trauma. And it's all in the body. That trauma lives in the body. That's where it all needs to be released from.
Yeah, it definitely does. It stores in the body. And as we are evolving, we're seeing more and more evidence of how dis-ease settles in the body and manifests as a disease, right? Or a pain or something. So when somebody does your touchless orgasm workshop, is it a few weeks? What does it look like? Like for
So currently on my site, I have a freebie that people can sign up for that gets them started.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of completing a book on it, which probably will be about 2 weeks. And that book's going to be $5, and it's totally work at your own pace.
Oh, okay.
And then if people want to sort of get a little bit more support, there's some options to have like guided meditations instead of just having to do it on your own from the book. So there's a few levels depending on people's how far they want to go into the work, what their financial ability is.
Yeah.
Starts at $5 and it goes up to one-on-one coaching, right?
Right.
But everything they need in Touchless Orgasm is in the book. And I really think, how long does it take? That's so individual, right? Some people might not want to go to Touchless Orgasm. Like that may be too much of a party trick that they don't need kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
But so even if those people can just work on the touchless pleasure and reconnecting with the pleasure in their body. And that comes a little bit quicker, that ability to find that pleasure. So it's really so dependent on the sexual ecology the person is coming in with and where they want to go. I personally think that this is a lifelong practice.
Yeah.
Like I am in touch with my pleasure, in touch. I'm using air quotes, you can't see me, in touch without touching.
Right.
On a daily basis, right? Like I always tune in with my body, like what feels pleasurable right now. And depending on my mood and what's happening in my day, like I might spend half an hour like playing with that pleasure, building it up. And if I have, for me, it's longer, and this again is very dependent. If I want to go to full touchless orgasm, that's like I'm carving out Sunday, and I'm playing.
You're
for a couple
carving out a
hours.
lot of time for yourself.
To just like.
But do you do it like with a group, or do you have like a sacred group that talks about their experiences together? Like, or is this that everybody's just working on their own pace with you, with what your different offerings?
Yeah, it depends on the level of support that they want. There is a group that they is a monthly fee that they can join, and my clients have actually loved those live sessions. That's where, everybody's at home in front of their computer, and I basically walk them through anywhere, probably about an hour, a completely live practice, a live touchless orgasm practice.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, because I want people to understand that, because some people that's going to be like, oh, I would really like to experience that, and then some people are going to be like, oh no, I don't want to be with other people that just, I'm not at that space yet. So, okay, so there's a lot of options for people.
Yep.
That's good. Yeah. Okay.
Totally.
So what have you found is one of the most common issues that your clients get when, what gets in the way of their pleasure? Like, what's common for us humans? What are we usually doing?
Yeah. Ooh, that's such a good question. I think I've been a little bit surprised by how often when people get into the work, religious conditioning comes up for them. That's been fairly common, and body issue, I think, comes up almost for every woman that's taken the course. So those are kind of two of the big ones.
Yeah.
With a good amount of shame sort of intermingled throughout there for good measure, sort of woven through everything.
Yeah, shame is interesting, man. We really need to transmute shame, alchemize shame on a global scale. Because I think everybody has it or has dealt with it at one point in their life, about something. Totally. It's just amazing. So I didn't get a chance to ask you in the beginning. You said you came from a conservative family in Canada. What do your parents think about the work that you're doing? That you're doing this? What do they say to you?
Oh goodness. I wouldn't say they're. I always want to defend them. I'm like, they're not really. I grew up in Alberta, which is probably the most conservative province in Canada.
Okay.
But I'm always like, I don't know, was my family really conservative? But then sometimes my parents say things about politics and various other things. I'm like, oh my God, you're so conservative. They just don't ask now.
They don't ask. Okay.
They know that I'm doing the work, and sometimes I'll tell them something positive that's happening in the business, like, oh, I got a new client, or I finished writing my book or whatever. And they're like, okay, are you making money? I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So they don't say like, oh, this is my daughter Jen, and she teaches touchless orgasm.
Oh, good Lord, no.
That would be awesome if they did, right?
But
That
you
would be
know,
so good.
no, but you know what's funny is there are some, they're not going to listen to this. I do have
Friends of
some
theirs
family
that are
members and some children of some friends that will ask me things that they know that I do it, and even though like this is definitely not something we ever talk about at the dinner table,
Right.
but there have been some young people who have asked me about sexuality, and they're like, you know, I've heard like, you're the only adult that I know is not going to lie about this, or you're the only
Right.
adult I can even ask about this. So that fills me with so much joy that even though, like I said, my older conservative family, they're like, we don't talk
Yeah.
about it, but to know that some of the younger people are listening and
Yes.
are asking questions and feel safe to ask questions warms my heart. But the flip side of that is that they should have somebody else to go to. Like, what about all the other people that don't have like Auntie Jen or friend Jen, you know,
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, where are they getting their information? So
Yeah.
I think we have so much work to do still, but
I do
But
too.
I feel like
but the younger
it's shifting.
generation, though, they are much more open than, well, my generation anyway. I'm Gen X. I don't know. Are you a millennial? Would you be a millennial? or are you-
I'm 1976. I'm right on the cusp.
You're right on the cusp. Okay, yeah. So the young Gen Zers, my niece is a teenager. She's a Gen Zer. And I just hear the way she talks about things. They're so much more open and accepting, and, you know, people like, you know, trying to get the gender identity thing. I always consult her, because I'm like, what is that now? How is they that? Like, I want to be respectful, you know? So I'm like trying to understand it. So she's my consultant.
Yeah.
14. It's funny.
Yes.
But they are.
Yeah.
So hopefully they will, you know, not carry as much shame as we have around our own sexuality, you know.
It feels very promising, and it
Yeah, it
feels very
does.
positive. You know, one thing I think is happening, I mean, I realize I'm in the field, so my perception is somewhat skewed, but there are so many women who are stepping into this work, doing
Yes.
spiritual work, sexuality work. It very much feels to me that there is, I think of it as a quiet revolution going on,
Yeah.
where women are,
I see it.
you know,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, they might not be, you know, on the global scale yet, but they're in their communities, in their own lives, with their friends, with their families. They are stepping into this power, and I think we're living in such amazing times, largely for that reason, that women are making the shift, and men are too, right? There is, I think, it's not just women. There is this shift into like more spirituality, more kindness, more consciousness, more like let's evolve, and it's so amazing to be a part of that right now. Like, I find it so joyful.
Me too. I definitely see a lot of women who are middle-aged, they have grown children or whatever, and they're reclaiming their power.
Yes.
They're like, all right, what do I want now for this part of my life, this second half of my life or whatever? Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I see it and I can feel it. So is there anything that, because we only have like a couple of minutes, that I really want to give you the opportunity to share with us about what you're doing, or the work, or our own sexuality or pleasure?
I would just say to people that you're not broken. No matter where you are is where you need to be, and you can start from any point, and you have unlimited capacity for pleasure, but it is up to you to decide if you're going to move toward that.
Yeah. And I didn't get a chance to share how people can find you. So tell everybody what the best way to find you is if they want to work with you.
They can head on over to my site, which is JennWodtke.com, and my most active social media is Instagram, which is also Jenn Wodtke.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jen. I'm glad we got going and we got moving. It was really fun talking to you. I really enjoyed it. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to Postcards to the Universe with Melissa, creating the life you crave. And I'm wishing everyone a wonderful week filled with joy, abundance, and love. Peace.